Nazi, wo es sich ergab, und die Metro war abends sehr stark frequentiert durch Soldaten, in der Metro deponiert.
Opposition from below. A handful of men and women who can't guess that General Karl-Heinrich von Stülpnagel, their commanding officer in Paris, is pursuing goals similar to theirs. Even while he's still responsible for the execution of French hostages, he's in contact with the resistance within the Wehrmacht. They are still plotting Hitler's overthrow in spite of all the failures, and the driving force of the conspiracy is Colonel Henning von Tresckow. In the summer of 1943, he's temporarily transferred to Berlin. In the capital city, he makes further contacts with the civilian resistance and like-minded officers. Since September 1943, Klaus Schenk Graf von Stauffenberg is one of them. He's a staff officer in the Reserve Army, based in their central Berlin headquarters, the Bendler Block. All of the troops that are not at the front belong to the Reserve Army, among them the powerful occupying forces in France. At this time, Tresckow's office is also located in the Bendler Block. In the staff of the Reserve Army, Stauffenberg is responsible for writing emergency orders for the entire force. The code word Valkyrie will trigger their dispatch from Berlin as emergency measures to quell domestic unrest. Stauffenberg and Tresckow change the orders. The new version authorizes the Reserve Army to march against the SS and every party office, even in the occupied territories, should Hitler be assassinated. Meanwhile, the Reich is moving more and more onto the defensive. In June 1944, Allied troops land in Normandy. Military defeat is imminent. The conspirators are forced to act. Henning von Tresckow is promoted to Major General and is transferred back to the Eastern Front in command of a division. In his new position, he's unable to intervene in the plot in Berlin. But since the invasion, he's been urging the others to act. There's not much time left. There are still far too few conspirators, but that's not what matters to Tresckow. He says,
"The assassination must take place, whatever the cost. The essential point is not the practical aim, but that the German resistance dared to take the decisive gamble before the world and before history."
Words of a lonely hero. But there is a practical aim. Only Hitler's death can secure a truce with the Western Allies and allow the Eastern Front to be held. Hitler is at his headquarters, the Wolfslair. Stauffenberg decides to plant the bomb himself. Then he'll fly back to Berlin to direct the coup d'etat. At Trent Park, German generals and colonels speak openly about Stauffenberg. In the wake of the assassination attempt, they're torn between admiration and surprise.
Stauffenberg, now he always had
What a man. A noble, decent human being.
A man with principles.
The model of a decent, intelligent general staff officer. A man with the welfare of his troops at heart.
One couldn't have wished for a better and a more intelligent staff officer.
It was a pleasure to have worked with a man like him back then.
20th of July 1944, Hitler's headquarters, shortly before 1 p.m. Stauffenberg, the would-be assassin, returns to Berlin. From his office in the Bendler Block, he means to issue orders to arrest all of Hitler's main party cronies. 4:30 p.m., the Valkyrie order is dispatched to every office of the Wehrmacht with the following declaration.
The Führer, Adolf Hitler, is dead. In this hour of extreme danger, the government of the Reich has imposed a state of emergency in order to maintain law and order.
In Paris, General von Stülpnagel waits impatiently for news. He's in the know and ready to follow the conspirators. In his area of jurisdiction, he plans to disarm the SS and the rest of Hitler's loyal power base. He's just waiting for the signal to act. But Hitler is alive, as all the conspirators in Berlin now know. In Paris, von Stülpnagel begins to take the measures called for in the Valkyrie Order, arresting the SS and the party's security service, the SD. The coup d'etat is supposed to function just like this in every military district of the Reich. Stülpnagel's superior is the man who was ready to go along with assassination plans a year before, Field Marshal Günther von Kluge, now Commander-in-Chief West. Together with Cäsar von Hofacker, Stauffenberg's cousin, Stülpnagel goes to Kluge's headquarters on the evening of July the 20th. If the coup succeeds, at least in Paris, it could be the beginning of the end of the Nazi regime.
Mein Vater hat dann zusammen mit Hofacker eine Besprechung mit Kluge gehabt, der inzwischen definitiv wusste, dass Hitler lebt. Mein Vater und Hofacker haben ihn bearbeitet. Er möchte mitmachen, aber dann kommt der berühmte Satz von ihm, ja, wenn das Schwein tot wäre.
Günther von Kluge turns them down. Perhaps he believes that a coup can only lead to chaos, or perhaps he wants to save his own skin.
Kluge war im Laufe des Krieges auch durchaus bereit, in Richtung von Opposition oder sogar Widerstand zu gehen. Aber er wollte Erfolg haben und er wollte nicht in der Geschichte als Verräter darstellen. Das ist ein Motiv bei diesen höchsten Generälen, das man nicht unterschätzen darf.
It wasn't just Kluge. All the field marshals refused to participate in the resistance when it counted. Together they could have saved millions of lives lost in the final months of the war. There were as many victims in the last 10 months of the war as there had been in the previous 5 years. The Wehrmacht as an instrument of resistance would remain the dream of a handful of hopeful conspirators.
Es lag daran, dass es zu wenige gewesen sind, die sich Hitler entgegenstellten. Wenn Sie andere Überlegungen, die es auch schon gegeben hat, dass gesagt wurde, warum haben nicht preußische Offiziere das besser machen können, dann ist mein Gegenargument an dieser Stelle immer, wie sollten sie es denn besser machen, wenn sie nur so wenige waren?
And yet for a long time, it seemed as if the esprit de corps, the bond between the generals and senior officers, might achieve something against Hitler and his followers. No one betrayed the conspirators, even though very many people were in the know. However, within the Wehrmacht, that loyalty was only enough to guarantee silence, not to act. Some of the officers at Trent Park expressed their surprise at this lack of resolve.
Most of the army knew about the 20th of July, you know?
No.
It was discussed incredibly often.
No, I don't believe that.
They even consulted the commanders of the individual armies beforehand.
The situation of the plotters in Berlin is hopeless. Later in the evening of July the 20th, Stauffenberg and 3 of his co-conspirators are executed at the Bendler block.
Fire!
Henning von Tresckow, long the leader of the resistance within the Wehrmacht, learns early the next morning that the coup d'etat has failed. In the papers he left behind, he wrote,
I played for high stakes. If you lose a trick like that, you have to take the consequences.
Henning von Tresckow was no saint, but a child of his times. Above all, he wanted to serve his country, first as a supporter of Hitler, then as his bitter adversary. He was the exception among the generals. Many of them were against Hitler when defeat